In a glass tower, a female CEO notices something strange. Her janitor, a quiet man earning just $2,000 a month, has been donating hundreds to charity every single payday. The rumor spreads fast. People laugh, call him a fraud, say it's a stunt for attention. But driven by suspicion, she decides to follow him after work to uncover the truth. And what she discovers that night will break her heart. Before we continue, tell us what time it is and where you're watching from. Subscribe and hype, because tomorrow, I've got something extra special for you. Clara Lane had learned, at 8 years old, that kindness was a luxury the poor could not afford. She remembered the day clearly. Her mother, exhausted from working 2 shifts at the diner, had given their last $20 to a neighbor who promised to pay it back. The neighbor never did. That week, Clara went to school hungry, wearing shoes with holes in the soles, watching the neighbor's daughter parade around in brand new sneakers. Her mother cried that night. Not from anger, but from shame at not being able to feed her own child. Clara, listening through the thin apartment wall, made herself a promise. She would never be that vulnerable again. She would never let kindness make her weak. The lesson sank deep. When Clara was 10, her mother gave their winter coats to a family whose house had burned down. Clara and her mother shivered through February in threadbare jackets, while the other family stayed warm. When Clara was 12, her mother lent their car to a coworker whose own had broken down. The coworker totaled it. Clara's mother lost her job because she could no longer get to work. Each act of kindness punished them. Each open hand got slapped. Young Clara watched and learned. Generosity was a trap. Trust was weakness. Survival required walls. Now, at 33, Clara stood at the window of her corner office on the 42nd floor of Helios Tower, looking down at the city she had conquered. She had climbed out of poverty through scholarships, 80-hour work weeks, and an iron determination to never ever be hungry again. The climb had required sacrifices, friendships abandoned because they slowed her down. A marriage that lasted 11 months before her husband complained she loved her work more than him. He was right. She did. Because work was safe, work was controllable, work did not smile at you while taking your last $20. Her assistant knocked. Miss Lane, outstanding contribution day is confirmed for Friday, 3 o'clock. The awards are engraved, and we have confirmed attendance from 200 guests. Clara nodded without turning. Outstanding Contribution Day, her creation. An annual celebration of winners, the ones who understood that success was about results, not intentions. The top performers who closed the biggest deals, who exceeded their targets, who understood that nice finished last. She believed in this fiercely because she had lived it. Nice did not get you promoted. Nice got you used. Nice left you hungry while someone else wore the coat you needed. Miss Lane, her assistant prompted. Is there anything else you need? No, that is all. The door closed. Clara returned to her 3 monitors, each displaying different metrics, revenue streams flowing like rivers of light, investment portfolios growing like carefully tended gardens, efficiency ratings showing perfect optimization, everything running exactly as it should. This was her fortress, her proof that she had made the right choice all those years ago. She had escaped the trap of kindness and built something that could never be taken from her. What she did not think about, what she had trained herself not to see, were the people who cleaned this fortress, who emptied the trash bins at midnight, who polished the glass walls until they disappeared, who kept everything running while remaining invisible themselves. That invisibility was not cruelty, Clara told herself. It was simply the natural order. Some people built empires. Some people maintained them. Everyone had their role. Acknowledging that was not heartless, it was honest. She took a sip of her espresso, already cold, and pulled up the next quarterly projection. Numbers did not disappoint. Numbers did not betray. Numbers were the only truth that mattered. 42 floors below, in the basement level where the fluorescent lights hummed their midnight song and the air smelled of cleaning solution and concrete, Jack Hale pushed his cart through the corridor. Jack was 40 years old, a black man with hands that told stories of hard labor. His palms were calloused from years of gripping tools, hauling equipment, scrubbing floors. His knuckles bore the small scars of a life spent working with his hands. He moved with the careful economy of someone who knew how to pace himself through a long shift, saving energy for the work that came after. He had been a mechanic once, a good one too, could diagnose an engine problem by sound, could rebuild a transmission in his sleep. He had loved that work, the puzzle of it, the satisfaction of making something broken run smooth again. But 12 years ago, the plant closed, 600 jobs gone overnight. The owners took their tax breaks and relocated overseas, leaving a community with nothing but boarded-up buildings and shattered futures. Jack had scrambled after that. Construction work when he could find it. Loading docks, warehouse inventory. Whatever paid enough to keep food on the table for his wife and baby daughter. Then his wife got sick. Cancer, the aggressive kind that moved fast. They caught it too late, and even if they had caught it early, they could not have afforded the treatment. No insurance, no savings, just medical bills that grew like tumors, consuming everything they had. She died when Ella was 2 years old. Jack held his daughter at the funeral, feeling her small body shake with sobs she was too young to understand, and something inside him went dark. For a year after that, Jack was angry. Angry at a world where good people died because they could not afford to live. Angry at a system that ground the poor into dust, while the rich grew richer. Angry at God, at fate, at every unfair thing that had ever happened. The anger was eating him alive. He could feel it. Could see it in the way Ella flinched when he snapped at her over small things. Could taste it like metal in his mouth every morning. One night, he stood in their tiny apartment, looking at Ella sleeping on the couch they could not afford to replace, and he realized the anger was going to destroy them both. He could not change what had happened, could not bring his wife back, could not fix the system that had killed her. But he could choose what happened next. He could let the anger win, let it turn him into something bitter and broken, or he could find another way. Not forgiveness, he was not that generous, but purpose, meaning, some way to make the suffering count for something. That is when he found Sunshine Orphanage. For the past 5 years, Jack had worked the night shift at Helios Group, 6 in the evening until 2 in the morning. $2,000 a month. It was barely enough, but it was steady. Steady mattered when you had a 9-year-old daughter depending on you. $900 for rent on a 2-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood where gunshots were background noise, but the building was mostly safe. $300 for groceries if he shopped carefully, buying rice in bulk and stretching every dollar. $200 for Ella's school expenses, supplies, field trips, the occasional book fair where she could pick one new book. $150 for utilities and bus fare. That left $450. Enough for emergencies, enough for Ella's outgrown shoes and winter coat, enough to breathe. Except Jack did not keep it all. He could not, because every time he closed his eyes, he saw those children at Sunshine Orphanage, saw their thin faces and worn clothes, saw the leaking roof and broken heater, saw Betty trying to stretch donated food across too many mouths. So every month, Jack took $350 of those dollars and put them in the donation box, left himself with $100 for everything else, $100 to last 30 days. It meant eating rice and beans most nights, meant walking the 3 miles to the bus stop instead of taking a closer route that cost more. Meant telling Ella that new shoes would have to wait another month, that the school field trip was too expensive this time, that they could not afford the birthday party she wanted. But it also meant Maria, the deaf girl at Sunshine, could get the surgery that led her here. Meant the roof was patched before winter. Meant those children did not go to bed hungry. Jack told himself it was worth it. Told himself he was making the right choice. But some nights, lying on his worn mattress and listening to Ella cough in the next room because the heating in their building was inadequate, he wondered if he was being foolish. Wondered if his wife would think he was taking care of their daughter properly. Wondered if choosing other people's children over small comforts for his own made him a good person or a bad father. But then he would remember Ella's words from last month, when she found out he had given away the money they could have used for her birthday party. "It is okay, Daddy. Those kids do not have any parents at all. At least I have you." And he would know he was teaching her something important. Teaching her that having enough meant you could share. teaching her that other people's suffering mattered, teaching her to be better than the world that had broken their family. As Jack worked through the executive floor that night, moving quietly through spaces that smelled of expensive carpet and wood polish, he paused outside Clara Lane's office. She was still there, hunched over her keyboard, alone in her glass tower. He wondered sometimes what drove people like her. What made someone work until midnight in an empty building, surrounded by luxury but isolated? Did she have family, friends, anyone waiting at home? Then he shrugged and moved on. Everyone had their reasons. Everyone carried their own weight. Whatever pain drove her to build this empire was hers to manage, just as his was his. By 12:15, Jack reached the main lobby. The security guard was doing rounds on another floor. The building was silent, except for the hum of climate control and the distant rumble of the city outside. Near the entrance stood a clear donation box for Helios Group's charitable programs. Jack stopped in front of it, as he did every month, and pulled out his wallet. He counted the bills carefully. $2,000. He had already set aside the $900 for rent, due in 3 days. Had set aside the groceries money, the school money, the utilities money. $450 remained. Jack stood there, tired deep in his bones, and did the math he had done 100 times before. Ella needed new shoes. The ones she wore were too tight, pinching her toes. He could see her trying not to limp. Good shoes would cost $40 if he found them on sale. That would leave $60 for the rest of the month. $60 for any emergency, any unexpected expense, any moment when his daughter needed something he had not planned for. But then he thought about the call he had received from Betty yesterday. The heating system at Sunshine was failing. Without repairs, those children would freeze through the winter. The repairs would cost $800. Betty had $500 saved, needed $300 more. Jack thought about Daniel in his wheelchair. About Sophie who drew pictures of houses she would never live in. About Maria who could finally hear but might lose that gift if she got sick from the cold. He thought about his wife, dying because they could not afford treatment. About the helplessness of watching someone you love suffer while the world shrugged. He could not save everyone. Could not fix the system, but he could make sure those 12 children did not freeze. Jack pulled out $350 and slipped it through the donation slot. Ella could wear her old shoes for 1 more month. He would cut extra cardboard to put inside them, make them fit a little longer. They would be okay. They always managed. What he did not know was that someone was watching. Amanda Torres stood in the stairwell doorway, phone already out. She had stayed late to finish a report, had been heading to her car when she saw the janitor at the donation box. She watched him count his money, watched the hesitation, watched him deposit what looked like most of his paycheck. A slow, cruel smile spread across her face. This was too good. This was going to be hilarious. She snapped a photo, the flash reflecting off the plastic donation box, and immediately started composing an email. Anonymous would be perfect. Let the bosses know what kind of fraud they employed. A janitor pretending to be some kind of saint, probably skimming from somewhere, trying to look good. Pathetic. She hit send and went home, already imagining the gossip tomorrow. Jack finished his shift, took the late bus home, walked the 3 blocks to his apartment building. He let himself in quietly, checked on Ella sleeping under 2 blankets because their heater was inadequate. He stood in her doorway for a moment watching her breathe, this beautiful child, who deserved so much more than he could give her. I am doing my best, he whispered. I hope it is enough. Then he went to his own small room, set his alarm for 7 so he could make Ella breakfast before school, and fell into exhausted sleep. He did not dream, he was too tired to dream. But if he had, he might have dreamed of a world where doing the right thing did not cost so much, where choosing to help did not mean choosing to suffer, where kindness was not a luxury only the wealthy could afford. He might have dreamed of a world that was better. Instead he slept dreamlessly, and morning came too soon. The email arrived at 6:30 the next morning. Clara was already at her desk, her first espresso cooling beside her keyboard, eyes scanning through overnight reports from overseas offices. Tokyo showed strong numbers. Singapore needed attention. London was on track. The anonymous email appeared in her inbox like a stone thrown through glass. Subject line: "Your janitor thinks he's a hero." Clara's finger hovered over the delete button. She received dozens of anonymous emails every week. Disgruntled employees, rejected vendors, competitors trying to rattle her. But something about this one made her pause. The phrasing, "your janitor," the possessive, the contempt. She clicked. The photograph loaded slowly, pixel by pixel. Jack Hale at the donation box. Wallet open, cash visible in his hand, clearly in the act of depositing it. Below the image, caught your janitor pretending to be generous with his pathetic salary. Does it after hours when nobody's around to see. Classic attention-seeking behavior from someone desperate for recognition, probably skimming from somewhere to afford this little performance. Thought you should know what kind of fraud works for you. Clara stared at the screen. Her first reaction was not what she expected. Not disgust at the supposed fraud, not concern about company reputation, but irritation at the email's logic. The email called this attention-seeking behavior, but attention-seeking required an audience. Clara had organized enough corporate charity events to know the formula. You gave publicly, during business hours, with photographers present. You made sure everyone knew. That was philanthropy 101. So why would Jack Hale give at 12:15 in the morning in an empty lobby if he wanted attention? The question lodged in her mind like a splinter. Clara hated unanswered questions. They felt like loose threads that might unravel something important if pulled. She accessed the internal donation database, something she had not looked at in months, entered Jack Hale's employee identification number. The screen loaded, $350. Monthly donation, date of first donation 5 years, 2 months ago, last donation yesterday. Clara pulled out her calculator. 350 times 62 months, $21,700. She accessed his personnel file. Employment start date matched the donation start date. Current salary, $2,000 per month. Gross. After taxes, approximately $1,600 take-home. Clara sat back in her chair, the espresso forgotten. $21,700 over 5 years on a $1,600 monthly income. That was over 22% of his gross earnings. Probably closer to 27% of his actual take-home pay. This was not fraud. Fraud had an endgame, a payoff. This was something else entirely. Something that made no sense in Clara's carefully constructed worldview. She thought about her own charitable contributions. $10,000 a year, carefully tax-deducted, always publicized in the annual report. It cost her nothing. $10,000 was less than she spent on her car payment. The donation bought good optics, business connections, and a sense of superiority. But Jack Hale was giving away the difference between survival and comfort, between eating well and going hungry, between security and one emergency away from disaster. Why? The question consumed her attention. She tried to focus on the Tokyo report, but her mind kept returning to the photograph. To the logic that did not add up, to the nagging sense that she was missing something important. She forwarded the email to her head of security. Find out who sent this, quietly. The response came back in 47 minutes. Amanda Torres, Junior Secretary, Marketing Division. Had worked late last night. Clara called her in. Amanda arrived at 8:30, confident, expecting praise for exposing the fraud. That confidence evaporated the moment she saw Clara's expression. Sit down. Amanda sat. Clara did not speak for a long moment, just looked at her. Let the silence stretch. Let it become uncomfortable. Finally, was anyone else in the lobby when you took this photograph? Amanda blinked. No, but, so you witnessed a man making a charitable donation when he believed himself to be completely alone, and your immediate response was to photograph him and mock him in an anonymous email. I just thought it was suspicious that you thought it was suspicious that someone making minimum wage would give to charity. So you assumed fraud. Did I understand correctly? Amanda's face reddened. I was trying to protect the company from what? From an employee who gives away 20% of his income to charity. From someone who has donated over $21,000 over 5 years. Clara leaned forward. Did you research any of this before sending your email? Did you check the records? Or did you just see a black janitor doing something that made you uncomfortable and decide he must be a fraud? That is not. I did not. Amanda stammered. Did you share this photograph with anyone else? The hesitation told Clara everything. How many people? Just a few friends, I thought. You thought wrong. You are dismissed. If I discover you have gossiped about this with any other employees beyond those you already told, you will be terminated immediately. Leave. Amanda fled. Clara sat alone in her office, anger simmering beneath her careful control. Not anger at Jack Hale, anger at herself for building a company where this was the default assumption, where an act of genuine generosity was immediately suspected as fraud, where a black man could not do something good without being accused of having an angle. She had built this culture. Through her policies, her attitude, her belief that everyone acted from self-interest. She had created an environment where kindness was seen as weakness or deception, never as genuine. But the anger could not erase the question. It kept returning, insistent. Why would someone sacrifice that much for nothing in return? Clara thought about the lessons of her childhood, about her mother crying in their thin-walled apartment, about being hungry while the neighbor's daughter wore new shoes, about learning that kindness was a trap that left you vulnerable. Those lessons had served her well, had driven her to success, had protected her from being used. But what if Jack Hale had learned different lessons? What if his poverty had taught him something other than walls and self-protection? The question unsettled her more than she wanted to admit. She tried to return to work, but the numbers on her screen might as well have been hieroglyphics. Her mind was elsewhere, circling the same question again and again. At 10 o'clock, she pulled up the donation records again, sorted by recipient organization. Every single one of Jack Hale's donations went to the same place, Sunshine Orphanage. Clara had never heard of it. She searched online. The website was ancient, clearly built in the early 2000s and never updated. The design was broken, images did not load properly. The About Us page showed only a paragraph of text and a single photograph of a small deteriorating building. The address was in the industrial district. A part of town Clara had never visited, would never have reason to visit. The kind of neighborhood you drove past quickly with your doors locked. Clara stared at the photograph of the building. It looked like it might collapse in a strong wind, like the kind of place that should have been condemned years ago. This was where Jack Hale sent $21,000. She should let it go, should focus on actual work, should file this away as an oddity and move on. But she could not. The question had hooks in her now, pulling at something deep in her chest, something she had buried a long time ago. Over the next 3 days, Clara found herself increasingly distracted. She attended meetings but barely contributed. She reviewed reports but could not concentrate. Her assistant asked twice if she was feeling well. "I am fine," Clara said. It was a lie. She was not fine. She was unraveling. Every decision she had made, every principle she had built her life on, suddenly felt questionable. She had achieved everything she set out to achieve, had escaped poverty, built an empire, proved she could not be broken. But she had built it all on a foundation of walls, on the belief that trust was weakness, that generosity was foolishness, that caring too much would destroy you. Jack Hale seemed to believe the opposite. And somehow, on a janitor's salary, he had managed to give away $21,000 without expecting anything in return. How? By the third evening, Clara made a decision that would have seemed insane to anyone who knew her. She cleared her schedule for the following night, told her assistant she had a personal matter to attend to, refused to provide details. Then she went home and dug through her closet, until she found old jeans and a plain jacket, clothes she had not worn since college. She pulled her hair back in a simple ponytail. No jewelry, no designer accessories, nothing that screamed wealth. She looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. Without the armor of expensive clothes and authority, she looked younger, vulnerable, more like the girl she used to be before she learned to build walls. Clara turned away from the mirror quickly. She did not want to think about that girl. That girl had been weak, had been hurt, had learned the hard way that the world punished softness. But as she got ready for bed, Clara found herself thinking about Jack Hale walking through her building at midnight, emptying trash bins, scrubbing floors, thinking about him standing in front of that donation box, alone, giving away money he desperately needed, thinking about how he did it anyway. She did not sleep well that night, did not sleep well any night that week, because the question would not let her rest: what if everything she believed about survival was wrong? By noon the next day, the photograph had infected the building like a virus. Clara heard the whispers as she walked to a meeting, saw the smirks, felt the shift in atmosphere. Did you see the picture? The janitor thinks he is some kind of saint, probably trying to scam the system somehow. Attention-seeking behavior, classic signs. She said nothing, did not intervene, told herself it was not her concern. People gossiped, that was human nature. It would blow over, but it did not blow over. By afternoon the whispers had grown louder, crueler. Clara heard them in the elevator, in the break room, in the hallway outside her office. How much could he even afford to donate? $20. So pathetic. Probably donated his kid's lunch money. What an idiot. I heard he has a kid. Imagine having a janitor for a father. A black janitor playing saint. That last comment, said with a laugh by a junior analyst Clara had promoted last year, made something twist in her chest. She walked past them without comment, returned to her office, closed the door, and sat there staring at nothing, feeling something she had not felt in years: shame. She had built this casual cruelty, this automatic assumption of fraud, this environment where generosity was mocked and kindness was suspect. She had created it through her policies, her attitude, her belief system. She had made a company where goodness was weakness and decency was foolishness, and now a good man was being destroyed by it. Jack heard the whispers that afternoon when he came in early for an emergency cleanup. Someone had spilled coffee across the third-floor conference room carpet, and the stain needed immediate treatment before it set. He moved through the hallways with his cart, hearing the conversation stop when he appeared, feeling the eyes on his back when he passed. He had experienced this before. Being a black man in predominantly white spaces meant learning to navigate suspicion, learning to make yourself smaller, learning to endure casual cruelty with dignity, because fighting back only made things worse. But knowing it was coming did not make it hurt less. In the break room restocking cleaning supplies, he heard two executives talking. They did not see him behind the shelving unit. Fraud, obviously. Where else would a janitor get money to donate? Probably stealing from the supply budget. They always find a way. Should report him to HR. People like that give the whole program a bad name. Jack gripped the bottle of cleaner in his hand, squeezing until his knuckles turned pale. Anger rose in his throat, hot and bitter. People like that. He wanted to step out from behind the shelves. Wanted to tell them about Maria's surgery. About the heating repairs. About choosing rice and beans for dinner so children he had never met could eat something more substantial. Wanted to tell them they were wrong. That he was not a fraud. That he was just trying to make the world slightly less cruel for someone else. But he said nothing, did nothing, because he knew how this worked. His anger would be seen as aggression. His defense would be seen as guilt. His very presence would be seen as threatening. So he waited until they left, then finished restocking the supplies with hands that shook slightly. At 2:30, he was summoned to Marcus Webb's office. The walk there felt like walking to an execution. Jack had been fired before, knew the signs. Knew that middle-class white executives like Webb did not call janitors to their offices for friendly conversations. Marcus Webb sat behind his massive desk, a man in his 50s who had built his career on being harder, smarter, more ruthless than everyone else. His office was designed to intimidate: high ceilings, expensive art, furniture that cost more than Jack made in a year. Marcus did not look up when Jack entered. Sit. Jack remained standing. I am on the clock, sir. I have work to. I said sit. The command was sharp enough that Jack obeyed automatically. The chair was deliberately low, forcing him to look up at Marcus, an old power play, a reminder of hierarchy. Marcus finally looked at him. His expression was cold, dismissive, the look of someone about to crush an insect. I have seen a photograph. Marcus began slowly, as if speaking to a child, of you making some kind of display at the charity donation box. I donate every month, sir. I was not making a display. I thought I was alone. Do not interrupt me. Marcus leaned forward. Let me be very clear about something. This company has built its reputation on integrity and authenticity. We value real contribution, not performance, not fraud. Jack felt his jaw tighten. Sir, I have not committed any fraud. You are a janitor, Mr. Hale. Marcus spoke over him. Your job is to clean floors, empty trash bins. Stay invisible. That is what you are paid to do. You are not paid to make statements. You are not paid to seek attention. You are certainly not paid to embarrass this company or its legitimate contributors with whatever scheme you are running. I am not running any scheme. I donate to an orphanage that needs. I do not care where you claim the money goes. Marcus's voice hardened. What I care about is that you are making professionals in this building uncomfortable. You are making them look bad by comparison with your little performance. That stops now. Jack stared at him, barely believing what he was hearing. You are telling me to stop donating to charity. I am telling you to stop the performance. Stop trying to be more than what you are. Stop playing hero. Do your job quietly and invisibly, the way you are supposed to. The way people like you are supposed to. Marcus stood looming over his desk. If I hear about this again, if you continue to draw attention to yourself in any way, you will be looking for work elsewhere. Are we crystal clear? People like you. The words hung in the air like poison. Jack understood exactly what Marcus meant. The racial subtext was so obvious it might as well have been shouted. Stay in your place. Be grateful for what you have. Do not dare to be more than we expect from someone like you. Jack stood slowly. His hands were shaking not from fear but from the enormous effort of containing his anger. From the rage at being reduced to nothing. From the exhaustion of always having to be twice as good and still being treated as less than human. Crystal clear, sir. Good. Now get back to work. Jack left the office, walking carefully as if one wrong step might cause him to shatter. In the hallway he stopped and pressed his back against the wall, breathing deeply. Ella's face appeared in his mind. Her voice from last week asking why people were sometimes cruel for no reason. Him telling her that hurt people, and the best response to cruelty was continued kindness. Practice what you preach, he whispered to himself. But God Almighty, it was hard. So hard. He thought about his wife dying in a hospital bed because they could not afford proper treatment. Thought about the insurance company representatives who had looked at them with the same cold dismissal he had just seen on Marcus's face. Thought about all the times he had been told, directly or indirectly, to stay in his place. To be grateful for scraps. To accept that his humanity mattered less than other people's comfort. Jack pushed off the wall and returned to work. Because he had a daughter to feed and rent to pay, and being fired for losing his temper was a luxury he could not afford. But something had cracked inside him. Some last reserve of hope that doing the right thing would eventually be recognized, that goodness would eventually matter, that the world could be anything other than cruel. That evening, as he finished his rounds on the executive floor, he passed a group of young executives gathered near the elevator. They did not lower their voices. Probably donated his kid's college fund. What a moron. Does he even have a kid? God, imagine having a janitor for a father. A black janitor trying to play Mother Teresa. It is embarrassing. I heard Webb tore him apart today. About time someone reminded him where he belongs. Jack kept walking, pushing his cart, becoming invisible again. Just as Marcus wanted. Just as society expected. The words followed him like ghosts. But on the 42nd floor, standing near the printer and retrieving quarterly reports, Clara heard every word. She had been heading back to her office when the voices carried clearly through the empty hallway. Had stopped listening, feeling something dark and ugly twist in her chest. Something that felt like shame. Something that felt like recognition. Because those voices sounded like her. Like the beliefs she had built her empire on. Like the worldview she had never questioned. Clara returned to her office but could not focus on the reports in her hand. The words kept echoing in her mind. Reminded him where he belongs. She thought about Jack Hale standing alone in an empty lobby depositing money when no one watched. Thought about him being mocked for it, accused of fraud, called to an executive's office and humiliated. Thought about how her company, her culture, her beliefs had created this. And for the first time in a very long time, Clara felt something crack in the carefully constructed walls around her heart. Clara tried to let it go. For 3 days she told herself it was not her concern. Jack Hale's charitable donations were his business. The gossip would fade. Life would return to normal. But the question would not leave her alone. Why would someone give away $21,000 on a janitor's salary? Why keep doing it month after month for 5 years? Why accept mockery and accusation without defending himself? What did Jack Hale gain from this? The question consumed her. She found herself distracted in meetings, unable to focus on contract negotiations, snapping at her assistant for minor mistakes. At night, alone in her expensive apartment with its floor-to-ceiling windows and designer furniture, Clara lay awake thinking about the photograph. About Jack Hale's face in profile, wallet open, hand depositing cash. About the empty lobby. The late hour. The total absence of audience. If kindness was performance, why perform for an empty room? On the 4th day, Clara pulled up the donation records again. Stared at them until the numbers blurred. $350. Every month, 62 consecutive months. No exceptions. No gaps. She accessed his personnel file again. Read through his entire employment history. Perfect attendance. Never late. 3 commendations from building management for exceptional work. 0 complaints. She found his original job application, filed 5 years ago. Previous employment, automotive mechanic, 12 years. Reason for leaving plant closure. Education, high school diploma. Dependents 1 daughter, Ella Hale, age 4 at time of hire. Clara did math she had done before but now with more context. $2,000 per month. After taxes maybe $1,600 take home. Minus $350 for donations left $1,250 for all living expenses. For 2 people in one of the most expensive cities in the country. Rent alone in the cheapest neighborhoods ran $800 to $900 for a 2-bedroom. That left roughly $400 for everything else. Food, utilities, clothing, school supplies, medical expenses, transportation. $400 for all of that. For an entire month. For 2 people. Clara thought about what she spent in a typical month. $3,000 for her apartment. $400 for her car payment. $250 for parking. Another $200 for utilities. $500 minimum for groceries, eating out, coffee. Before she even got to clothing, entertainment, or unexpected expenses, she had spent $6,000. More than 3 times Jack Hale's entire monthly income. And she still donated less than he did, as a percentage of her earnings. Clara sat back in her chair, feeling something uncomfortable settle in her chest. She thought about her own history with poverty. About being 8 years old and hungry because her mother gave their last $20 to a neighbor. About learning to distrust generosity, to see kindness as weakness, to believe that survival required walls. Those lessons had served her well. Had driven her to work harder than everyone else. Had pushed her to build this empire. Had protected her from being used or betrayed. But looking at Jack Hale's records, Clara had to ask herself, what if her mother had been right? What if the problem was not the giving, but the system that forced people to choose between generosity and survival? What if kindness was not weakness, but the system that punished it was cruel? What if Jack Hale had learned something from poverty that Clara had missed? The thought unsettled her more deeply than she wanted to admit. Because if she was wrong about this, what else might she be wrong about? Clara pulled up the donation records one more time, sorted by recipient. Every single donation went to Sunshine Orphanage. She searched for it online again, this time more thoroughly. Found a local news article from 3 years ago about the orphanage losing its government funding. Found a GoFundMe page that had raised only $800 toward a $20,000 goal. Found a review on a volunteer website from someone who had visited once and called the facility heartbreaking but doing the best they can with nothing. The website still showed that ancient photograph. A small building, clearly deteriorating, in an industrial area Clara had never visited. Clara stared at the address for a long time. She should focus on actual work. Should put this strange obsession aside. Should trust that Jack Hale knew what he was doing with his own money. But she could not let it go. Because somewhere beneath her carefully constructed worldview, a question was growing. What if everything she believed about survival was wrong? What if walls and self-protection had kept her safe but also kept her isolated? What if building an empire meant building a prison? What if winning meant losing something essential? Clara stood and walked to her window, looking down at the city 42 floors below. She had conquered this. Had built something that could never be taken from her. But standing alone in her glass tower, she could not shake the image of Jack Hale sitting on a floor with children, reading to them, being present in a way that had nothing to do with profit or protection or power. Could not shake the feeling that he had something she did not. Something she had traded away without realizing it. Something she might never get back. 1 week after the photograph arrived, Clara made her decision. She cleared her evening schedule. Told her assistant she had a personal matter to attend to, refused to elaborate. Went home and changed into the old jeans and jacket she had pulled from her closet days ago. She looked at herself in the mirror again. Without her armor of designer clothes and authority, she looked vulnerable. Looked like the girl she used to be before poverty taught her to be hard. Clara turned away quickly. Did not want to think about that girl. That girl had been weak, had believed in goodness, and gotten hurt for it. But as she got into her car and entered the address for Helios Tower into her GPS, Clara found herself thinking about Jack Hale again. About how he had been poor too, probably still was poor, but had somehow managed not to let it make him cruel. How was that possible? The question followed her as she drove through the city. Followed her as she parked 3 blocks from her own building. Followed her as she waited in the shadows for Jack Hale to emerge at 11:45. Followed her as she trailed him onto the bus, staying far enough back to avoid detection, watching him through the windows as the neighborhoods changed from wealthy to working class to poor to abandoned. Followed her as she got back in her car, and drove behind the bus, keeping distance, feeling absurd and compelled in equal measure. Followed her all the way to the moment when Jack Hale turned down an alley and disappeared through a door marked Sunshine Orphanage. Clara sat in her car for 5 minutes, heart pounding, telling herself to leave. To drive away, to forget this strange obsession and return to her safe, controlled life. But she could not. Because something had broken open inside her. Some wall had developed a crack. And through that crack, she could see something she had spent 30 years trying not to see. The possibility that she had been wrong. Clara got out of her car and walked toward the building, toward the truth she was not sure she was ready to face. The building looked worse up close than in photographs. Clara approached slowly, her expensive shoes crunching on broken glass and gravel. The neighborhood was silent except for distant traffic and the occasional bark of a dog. Street lights flickered, casting everything in unreliable shadows. Sunshine Orphanage sat at the end of the alley like a forgotten thing. The walls were covered in fading paint and old graffiti, most of it scratched away but leaving ghost images. Windows were patched with duct tape. The door was metal, dented with 3 deadbolts visible. Clara heard voices from inside. Children's laughter. The low rumble of Jack's voice. She moved closer, heart pounding, until she found a window on the side of the building. The curtain was thin, worn to near transparency in places. She could see through. What she saw stopped her breath. The interior was even more deteriorated than the exterior. Paint peeling in long strips, revealing water damage underneath. The furniture was clearly salvaged, mismatched chairs, a couch with springs visible through worn upholstery, folding tables with uneven legs propped up with cardboard. In one corner, a space heater rattled and glowed, barely adequate for the large room. Clara could see her breath misting slightly even from outside. Inside had to be cold, maybe 55 degrees. The children wore layers, sweatshirts over t-shirts, some in winter coats even indoors. But everywhere she looked, there were signs of care. Children's drawings covered the walls, taped carefully, preserved despite the peeling paint. Handmade decorations hung from the ceiling, paper chains, origami birds, cut-out snowflakes, even though it was autumn. Someone had painted hopeful murals over the worst of the damage, flowers, sunshine, rainbows. Clearly amateur work, probably done by Betty or the older children, but earnest. The room was meticulously clean. The floors, though cracked and uneven, were scrubbed. The windows, though patched, were washed. Everything was organized with the kind of care that spoke of love working with nothing. And in the center of it all, Jack Hale sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by children. Clara counted 12 of them. The youngest maybe 5, the oldest perhaps 13 or 14. Different races, 3 black children, 4 white, 3 Hispanic, 2 Asian, all wearing clothes that had clearly been donated, worn soft at the edges, some patched at knees and elbows. They gathered around Jack like he was the sun, and they were planets in orbit, like nothing in their world made sense unless he was there. A small black boy, maybe 6, leaned heavily against Jack's shoulder. A white girl with blonde braids sat in his lap, looking up at his face with absolute trust. The others formed a loose circle, all watching him with expressions Clara recognized from somewhere deep in her forgotten childhood. The expression of a child who has found something safe in an unsafe world. Jack was reading to them from a worn paperback. Clara could not hear the words through the window, but she could see his face, the gentle smile, the animated expressions as he changed his voice for different characters, going high for one, low and growly for another, making the children giggle. The way he made eye contact with each child as he read, ensuring they all felt included, seen, valued. His body language was completely unguarded. No tension, no performance, just a man being present with children who needed him. This was not fraud, this was not seeking attention, this was love. Clara felt something crack wider in her chest, something that had been frozen for a very long time beginning to thaw, and the thawing hurt. Betty appeared from what must have been a kitchen, carrying a tray. Clara recognized her from online photos, an older white woman, maybe 60, with gray hair pulled back and a face that showed decades of worry but also stubborn kindness. Betty set the tray on one of the folding tables. Cookies Clara saw. Small ones clearly homemade from whatever ingredients were cheapest. A jug of milk and plastic cups, the disposable kind from dollar stores. The children lined up patiently, no pushing or grabbing, well practiced at making do with limited resources. Betty poured milk carefully, not wasting a drop, giving each child 2 cookies with a smile and a gentle word Clara could not hear. The portions were small. Clara thought about the thousands of dollars worth of catering at Helios Group's outstanding contribution day tomorrow. Thought about the excess, the waste, the full plates she had seen thrown away. These children were excited about 2 cookies and 4 ounces of milk. As the children ate, Jack moved around the circle. He knelt beside a Hispanic girl, maybe 7, examining her scraped knee, pulled a bandage from his own pocket and applied it gently, talking to her quietly, making her smile despite the injury. He looked at a black boy's drawing of what might have been a spaceship or a building, asking questions about every detail, genuinely interested, making the boy glow with pride. He helped a white girl with thick glasses sound out words in her homework, patient as she struggled, celebrating when she got it right. He moved through the group with the kind of attention that said each child mattered individually, not as a group, not as charity cases, but as people he actually cared about. Then Jack stood and walked to a corner. Clara had not noticed at first. A boy sat there in a wheelchair, separated from the group. White, maybe 12 years old, with dark hair and a face that looked like it had forgotten joy existed. His expression was flat, empty, the look of someone who had been gutted by grief and had not yet learned to live with the whole. Jack pulled a folding chair over and sat down beside the boy. Did not speak at first, just sat there, present, patient. After a moment, the boy looked up. Jack smiled and said something. The boy shook his head. Jack nodded, still smiling, and just stayed there beside him. They sat like that for 5 full minutes. Jack did not push, did not force conversation, did not try to fix anything. He just sat, being present, letting the boy know he was not alone. Finally, the boy said something. Just a few words. Jack listened with complete attention before responding. A small conversation developed, quiet, private, nothing dramatic, no breakthrough moment, just 2 people talking in a corner. But when Jack eventually stood to rejoin the other children, the boy in the wheelchair was smiling. It was a fragile smile, small, barely there, but it was real. Clara felt tears on her face and realized she was crying. Standing in a dark alley, watching through a broken window, crying for the first time in she could not remember how long. She stayed there for over an hour, unable to look away, watched Jack help children with homework, patient with their mistakes, celebrating their successes, watched him fix a broken toy with duct tape from his pocket, making it work again through ingenuity and care. Watched him kneel beside a crying Hispanic boy, listening with infinite patience to whatever had caused the tears, not minimizing them, just being present with the pain. At 2:30 in the morning, Jack began preparing to leave. The children knew the routine. They lined up to hug him one by one, their small arms tight around his waist. "See you tomorrow night, Mr. Jack, always," he promised. "I will always come back, promise. Promise." Betty walked him to the door. Clara pressed herself against the wall, hidden in shadow, close enough now to hear their conversation. "Jack, I do not know what we would do without you." Betty's voice was thick with emotion, exhausted. That grant fell through again. "The heating system is on its last legs. Without your donations, we could not keep the lights on. Could not keep the doors open." "We will figure it out," Jack said gently. "We always do." "No, Jack, we would not." Betty's voice cracked. "Do you understand what you have done? You have given us $21,000 over 5 years. That is not just help. That is the difference between these children having a home and being scattered into a system that will break them. That is the difference between survival and destruction. You have saved lives, Jack, 12 lives.
You have saved them.
I just do what I can, Betty. That is all any of us can do. You sold your truck. It was not a question." Betty's voice was certain. 7 months ago, I know you did. I know where that money went. You sold your truck to pay for Maria's surgery. You have been walking to work ever since." Jack was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft. Maria needed to hear. She was drowning in silence. "I had a truck. It was worth saving her."
You have saved Jack.
"It is 3 miles from your apartment to the bus stop. You walk 3 miles every evening in the dark, through that neighborhood, before you can even get on the bus to come here, or to work. Do you know what could happen to you? And you do it so you can afford to keep giving. Walking is good, gives me time to think. Stop being humble." Betty's voice sharpened with affection and exasperation. "Let me say it plainly, you are a better man than anyone I have ever known. You are barely surviving yourself, and you give everything away. You walk 6 miles a day so children who are not yours can eat. You work all night, and spend every free hour here so these kids do not grow up, thinking they do not matter." Betty hugged him again, tight. "I do not understand how you do it, where you find the strength. But I am grateful. These children are grateful. You are saving them, Jack. Every single day you are saving them." Jack hugged her back. "They save me too, Betty. They remind me what matters. That is worth any cost." He left, walking down the alley with that tired but steady gait. Clara watched him until he disappeared into shadow. Then she stood alone in the darkness, her entire worldview crumbling like old concrete. She had been wrong. About everything. Jack Hale had sold his truck, his only vehicle, his only reliable transportation, to pay for a deaf girl's surgery. A girl who was not his daughter. A girl he had no obligation to help beyond basic human decency. He walked 3 miles to a bus stop, then took 2 buses to work so he could afford to keep giving. 6 miles a day on foot through dangerous neighborhoods to save money he then gave away. He spent every night after working 8 hours in a crumbling building with forgotten children, not because it advanced his career or earned him recognition or gained him anything at all, but because they needed someone to show up, someone to make them feel like they mattered. And the world, her company, her executives had mocked him for it, had accused him of fraud, had told him to stop, to be invisible, to know his place, had told him that his decency was suspicious, that his generosity must have an angle, that his kindness could not possibly be real. Clara thought about her own mother crying in that thin-walled apartment because she gave away their last $20. Thought about 8-year-old Clara making a promise to never be that vulnerable, to never let kindness make her weak. Thought about building her entire life around that promise, building walls so high that nothing could hurt her but also so high that nothing could reach her. She had achieved everything she wanted, had escaped poverty, had built an empire, had proved she could not be broken. But standing in a dark alley at 3 in the morning, Clara realized she had paid a price she had not understood until now. She had survived, but she had not lived. She had built a fortress, but she was alone inside it. She had learned how to win, but she had forgotten what winning was supposed to be for. Jack Hale had nothing, no security, no comfort, barely enough to survive, but he had something Clara had traded away 30 years ago. He had purpose, he had connection, he had the peace that came from knowing his life mattered beyond profit margins and quarterly reports. He had what she had spent her entire adult life telling herself did not exist: genuine goodness, kindness without calculation, generosity without expectation. He had joy. Clara walked back to her car on legs that felt unsteady, sat behind the wheel but could not start the engine, could not drive away yet, because something fundamental had shifted. Some load-bearing wall in her carefully constructed worldview had collapsed, and she did not yet know what would be left standing when the dust settled. She sat there until dawn, watching the sky lighten, thinking about choices and consequences and the different lessons poverty could teach. Thinking about a woman who built walls and a man who built bridges, thinking about which one of them had actually escaped. Clara did not go home. She sat in her car outside Sunshine Orphanage as the sun rose, unable to move, unable to process what she had witnessed. By 7 o'clock the neighborhood was waking up. A few people emerged from nearby buildings, heading to early shifts or bus stops. A delivery truck rumbled past. Life continuing, indifferent to Clara's crisis, she finally started her car and drove to the office. She had not slept, had not showered or changed clothes, did not care. Her assistant looked alarmed when Clara arrived at 8:30. "Miss Lane, are you all right? You look." "I am fine." "Cancel my morning appointments." "But the board presentation." "Cancel it. Reschedule for next week." Clara closed her office door and sat at her desk staring at nothing. She could not focus, could not think about contracts or strategies or profit margins. Her mind kept returning to that window, to those children, to Jack Hale sitting on a cold floor reading stories with infinite patience, to the realization that her empire was built on the exact opposite principles that motivated him. She had built Helios Group on the belief that people acted from self-interest, that trust was weakness, that kindness was a transaction requiring payment. Those principles had driven every decision, every policy, every hire and fire and promotion. And they had created a company where genuine goodness was mocked, where a man giving away what little he had was accused of fraud, where casual racism was acceptable, where invisible people stayed invisible. Clara thought about Marcus Webb telling Jack to act like a janitor, to stay invisible, to know his place. Thought about the racial undertones that everyone pretended not to hear. Thought about how she had built a culture where that was normal. She had escaped poverty by becoming hard, by refusing to trust or be vulnerable, by treating kindness as weakness. But Jack had escaped poverty differently. He had become harder in some ways, had learned to endure mockery and cruelty with dignity, but he had also become softer, had refused to let suffering make him cruel, had chosen to give even when giving hurt. Two people, similar backgrounds, opposite conclusions, and Clara was forced to ask herself which one of them had made the right choice. She spent the morning researching Sunshine Orphanage, found news articles about the funding cuts, found budget reports showing they operated on less than $40,000 a year for 12 children, Found health and safety violations that were technically grounds for closure but were being overlooked by sympathetic inspectors who knew there was nowhere else for these kids to go. Found a heartbreaking article from 2 years ago about Daniel, the boy in the wheelchair. His parents had died in a car accident. Same accident that had severed his spine. He had no other family. Had been placed at Sunshine because no foster families wanted a disabled child. Had stopped speaking for months, stopped eating, nearly died from the weight of his grief, until Jack Hale started showing up every night, just sitting beside him, being present. Daniel had spoken for the first time in 4 months to ask Jack if he would come back tomorrow. Jack had said yes, and had come back every single night since. Clara put her head in her hands, felt tears coming again and did not try to stop them. She had been so wrong. So fundamentally completely wrong about everything that mattered. For 3 days Clara moved through her life like a ghost. She attended meetings but barely spoke, reviewed reports but could not focus, signed documents without reading them carefully. Her assistant asked repeatedly if she was ill. Clara said no, said she was fine. It was a lie. She was not fine. She was unraveling. Every decision she had made, every principle she had built her life on suddenly felt hollow. She had achieved everything she set out to achieve. But what had she achieved, really? Money, power, security, an empire that bore her name, but no joy, no connection, no purpose beyond accumulation. She was 33 years old and she could not remember the last time she had laughed genuinely. Could not remember the last time she had felt the kind of peace she had seen on Jack Hale's face in that orphanage. Could not remember the last time she had felt human. On the 4th day Clara made a decision. She called a meeting with her senior management team, sent out the notice with 48 hours advance warning, mandatory attendance. She spent those 48 hours preparing, not a presentation, not a strategy, but a speech. Words she needed to say that had nothing to do with profit margins or market share. Words about what kind of company they had become, about what kind of people they were, about what needed to change. When her management team gathered in the conference room, Marcus Webb looked annoyed as always. "Clara, what is this about? Some of us have actual sit down." Something in her voice made them all obey instantly. Made the annoyance disappear, replaced by wariness. Clara stood at the head of the table, did not pull up any slides or documents, just stood there, looking at each of them in turn. "I am going to tell you a story," she began, "about what real success looks like, about what it means to be a good person, about how badly I have failed to understand either, about how badly we have all failed." She told them everything. About Jack Hale's donations, $21,700 over 5 years. About Sunshine Orphanage, 12 children surviving on nothing. About the sold truck, and the 3-mile walks, and Maria, the deaf girl who could now hear because a janitor sold his only vehicle to pay for her surgery. About Betty, an older woman keeping 12 children alive on donated food and sheer will. About Daniel in his wheelchair, brought back from the edge of despair by someone who showed up every night just to sit beside him. About children who wore coats indoors because the heating barely worked, who celebrated 2 cookies like it was Christmas, who drew pictures of sunshine because the world had shown them so little light. And what did we do? Clara's voice was quiet but cutting. We mocked him. We accused him of fraud. We told him to stay invisible, to know his place, to stop trying to be more than a janitor. She looked at Marcus. "You called him into your office. You humiliated him. You told him his charity was fake performance. You told him to act like what he is, as if being a janitor means being less than human. As if his race means his generosity must be suspicious." Marcus opened his mouth. Clara raised her hand. "I am not finished. For the past week I have been thinking about what kind of company I have built, what kind of culture I have created, what kind of person I have become. And I do not like the answer to any of those questions." She pulled up documentation about Sunshine Orphanage on the screen behind her. Photographs of the building, budget reports, news articles about the funding cuts. "I am going to propose something to the board next week. A foundation to support places like Sunshine, not for publicity, not for tax breaks, but because it is right, because we have resources that people desperately need. Because a man making $2,000 a month should not be the only thing standing between 12 children and homelessness. She looked around the table. But before I go to the board, Marcus, you are going to apologize to Jack Hale, publicly, in front of the entire company. Clara, I understand you are upset, but that is not reasonable. This is not negotiable. You humiliated a good man for having more integrity than you could comprehend. You allowed racist comments to flourish in our workplace. You created an environment where decency is mocked and kindness is suspect. You are going to make it right, or you are going to leave this company. Choose now. The room was completely silent. Marcus's face went through several expressions: anger, incredulity, calculation. Finally, understanding that Clara was serious, he nodded. I will apologize. Good. I am scheduling an all-staff meeting for next Wednesday, 3 o'clock. That gives you 5 days to think about what you are going to say and how you are going to mean it. Clara looked around the table at the faces of her senior management, saw shame on some, confusion on others, resistance on a few. The rest of you start thinking about what kind of company you want to work for, because things are going to change around here. We are going to be better. We are going to value the people who make this place run. We are going to treat generosity as strength, not weakness. We are going to build something that matters beyond quarterly reports. She paused. And if you cannot do that, if you cannot be better, then you do not belong here anymore. Over the next 5 days, Clara worked tirelessly. She prepared a proposal for the board, researched foundation structures, consulted with legal about proper setup, worked with finance on sustainable funding models. But more than that, she worked on herself, on understanding what had broken inside her 30 years ago, on questioning every principle she had built her life around. She thought about her mother giving away their last $20, had spent 30 years thinking her mother was foolish. But what if her mother had understood something Clara had missed? What if the problem was not the generosity, but having to choose between generosity and survival in the first place? What if the real enemy was not kindness, but a system that punished it? What if Clara had spent 30 years fighting the wrong battle? She also made another decision, one that scared her more than she wanted to admit. She called Sunshine Orphanage, spoke to Betty, identified herself and asked permission to visit. I am not coming to offer help yet, Clara said honestly. I need to understand first, really understand, not watch through a window but be there. But only if you and Jack are comfortable with that. Betty was quiet for a long moment. I have seen a lot of people promise help and disappear, Miss Lane. A lot of people who take pictures for their social media and never come back. Why should I believe you are different? You should not. Not yet. I have not earned your trust. But I am asking for the chance to try. Another pause. I will talk to Jack. I will call you back. An hour later, Betty called. Jack says you can come Saturday evening, 6 o'clock. Dress in clothes you can get dirty. We are painting the recreation room. I will be there. Thank you. On Wednesday afternoon, every employee of Helios Group gathered in the main conference hall. 300 people. Standing room only. Word had spread that something significant was happening, though no one knew what. Jack Hale stood near the back, confused and uncomfortable. His supervisor had told him 5 days ago that attendance was mandatory, even for night shift employees. He had arranged for Mrs. Patterson to watch Ella after school, had rushed across town on 3 buses, arrived exhausted and anxious. People were staring at him, whispering. He tried to make himself smaller, invisible, the way Marcus Webb had told him to be. He had spent the last 2 weeks wondering if he was about to be fired, wondering how he would tell Ella they had to move again, wondering if he should start looking for new work preemptively. At 3 o'clock exactly, Clara Lane walked onto the stage. The room fell silent. Clara looked different. Jack could not identify what had changed, but something fundamental had shifted. She looked tired, raw, vulnerable in a way executives were not supposed to look. Human. Thank you for coming, Clara began. Her voice was steady but quiet. I am going to tell you what real success looks like. What it means to be a good person. What it means to build something that matters. And I am going to tell you how badly I have failed at all of those things. How badly we have all failed. She pulled up the photograph that had started everything. Jack at the donation box, alone giving. Some of you have seen this image. Many of you laughed at it. Some mocked the man in this photo. I am here to tell you that Jack Hale is a better person than anyone in this room, including me, especially me. Jack felt his face flush hot, felt 300 pairs of eyes turning toward him, wanted to disappear into the floor. Clara proceeded to tell the entire company everything about the donations. $21,700 over 5 years. About Sunshine Orphanage. About the 12 children surviving on nothing. About the sold truck and the 3-mile walks through dangerous neighborhoods. About Maria who could hear because Jack chose her life over his transportation. Jack Hale has given more, sacrificed more and loved more than any of us. Clara said, her voice cracking slightly. While we have been chasing promotions and bonuses, he has been changing lives. While we have been building careers, he has been building futures for children. Society forgot, while we have been measuring success in profit margins, he has been measuring it the only way that actually matters. Lives touched, hope restored, love given freely, dignity preserved, purpose found. The room was absolutely silent. Jack could feel every eye on him, could feel the weight of their attention, their judgment, their sudden reassessment. I called Jack's generosity into question. Clara continued. I suspected an angle, a performance, manipulation, because I have spent my entire adult life believing that people only act from self-interest, that kindness is transactional, that no one does good without expecting payment. She paused. Jack could see tears in her eyes. Jack Hale proved me wrong, and in doing so he revealed how empty my own success has been, how hollow the empire I built really is. How little any of it matters if we are cruel while building it. Clara stepped aside. Marcus Webb walked onto the stage, looking like he would rather be anywhere else in the world. Marcus approached the microphone. His hands were shaking slightly. Jack, he said. His voice was unsteady. I owe you an apology, a profound, inexcusable apology. Jack stood frozen, barely believing this was happening. 2 weeks ago I called you into my office. I told you that your charity work was fake performance. I told you that you were pathetic. I told you to stop trying to be more than a janitor, to stay invisible, to know your place. Marcus's voice broke. I said those things because your goodness made me uncomfortable, because I could not understand how someone with so little could give so much, because it was easier to accuse you of fraud than to examine my own failures. The room erupted in shocked whispers. People turned to look at Jack with expressions of horror, shame, belated understanding. Marcus continued, tears now visible on his face. I let racist comments flourish in our workplace. I heard people mock you for your race and your generosity, and I did nothing. I participated in a culture that treats people like you as invisible, as less than human, as suspect for having the courage to be kind. He paused, struggling. You are a hero, Jack. The kind the world desperately needs. The kind who shows up quietly, who gives without asking for anything, who loves without needing an audience or validation. You are a better man than I will ever be. And I am deeply, profoundly sorry for what I said, for what I allowed, for the culture I helped create. Jack stood there, emotions warring inside him. Part of him wanted to accept gracefully. Part was still angry, still hurt by the casual cruelty he had endured. Part just wanted to leave and never come back. But mostly he felt exhausted. Exhausted from always having to be twice as good. Always having to prove his humanity. Always having to smile through mockery and accusation. Finally he found his voice. It came out quieter than intended, but in the silent room everyone heard. We all make mistakes. The measure of a person is not in the mistakes themselves. It is in what we do after. What we choose to build after we realize we were wrong. That is what shows character. Marcus nodded, tears streaming down his face, and left the stage. Clara returned to the microphone. I have presented a proposal to our board of directors. It will be voted on next week. I am proposing that Helios Group establish the Helios Heart Foundation with dedicated funding to support community organizations like Sunshine Orphanage. Not for publicity, not for tax advantages, but because it is right. Applause broke out across the room. I am also proposing that Helios Group match every donation Jack Hale makes to Sunshine Orphanage. In perpetuity, if Jack donates $350, we donate $350. Every month. Forever, because one man should not bear this burden alone. The applause grew louder. But money is not enough. Jack does not just give money. He gives time. He gives presence. He gives himself. So I am also proposing a new company initiative. Every Helios employee will receive 4 paid hours per month, 48 hours per year, to volunteer at a charity of their choice. Not for photo opportunities, not for corporate social responsibility reports, but because it is the right thing to do. The room erupted. People stood. Someone started clapping rhythmically, and others joined. Clara had to raise her hand for silence. But I want to be clear about something, she said. Her voice cutting through the noise. This is not about me being a savior. This is not about Helios Group getting credit for fixing problems we helped create. This is about acknowledging that we have been wrong, that our values have been hollow, that we have treated people like Jack Hale as invisible when they are the ones doing the most important work. She looked directly at Jack across the room. Jack, you have been invisible in this company for 5 years. Today I am making sure everyone sees you. Not because you want to be seen. I know you do not, but because we need to see what real integrity looks like. Because we need to understand what it means to build something that matters. Because we need to be better, and you have shown us what better looks like. The applause was deafening. People were standing, chanting his name. Jack stood there, tears running down his face, overwhelmed. He had spent 2 weeks thinking he was about to be fired. Spent years being invisible, being mocked, being treated as less than human. And now this, he did not know how to process it. Did not know if it was real or if it would last. Did not know if anything would actually change, or if this was just a moment of guilt that would fade. But for now, standing in a room full of people who finally saw him, Jack let himself feel something he had not felt in a long time. Hope. Maybe, just maybe, the world could be better than he thought. Maybe, just maybe, goodness could win sometimes. Maybe, just maybe, his choice to keep giving, to keep showing up, to keep believing in people despite everything, had been the right choice. After all, Clara descended from the stage and walked through the crowd toward him. People parted, watching. When she reached him, she extended her hand. I would like to visit Sunshine Orphanage on Saturday, she said quietly. With your permission and Betty's, I need to learn. Really learn, not as a CEO. Just as a person who wants to understand. Jack looked at her for a long moment. Saw something in her eyes he had not expected. Genuine vulnerability. Real hunger to change. He shook her hand. Saturday, 6 o'clock, bring work clothes. We are painting, I will be there. And somehow Jack believed her. Saturday evening at 5:45, Clara arrived at Sunshine Orphanage. This time, she didn't wear designer casuals. Just old jeans, a faded sweatshirt, worn sneakers, the clothes of someone trying to be real. She parked 2 blocks away and walked. The neighborhood was harsh in daylight, boarded buildings, empty lots, people watching her pass like she was a stranger who didn't belong. At 6 sharp, Betty opened the door. You came, I said I would. Betty nodded slowly. Most people say they will. Not many do. Come in. Inside, the orphanage looked even rougher by day, peeling paint, patched walls, the scent of tomato sauce from the kitchen. Yet beneath the poverty there was warmth. Voices, life. The children were in the recreation room, half-painted, furniture covered with drop cloths. Jack was there, already working, paint splattered and focused. You came, he said simply. Grab a brush, we start with primer. No welcome speech, just work. Clara appreciated that. She joined him, fumbling awkwardly with the roller until a small voice behind her said, "You missed a spot." Clara turned to see a little girl with blonde braids. "Thank you," she said. "I'm Sophie," the girl replied. "You're the rich lady from Mr. Jack's work." "Yes," Clara admitted. "Are you gonna help us or just take pictures and leave like the others?" The question stung. Clara knelt to meet her gaze. "I'm going to try to help. I don't know how yet, but I'll keep showing up while I learn." Sophie studied her, then nodded. "Mr. Jack says learning is okay, if you keep showing up." And just like that, she turned away. No smile, no warmth, just quiet acceptance. Clara returned to painting, humbled. Trust here had to be earned through action, not words. As the evening went on, Clara learned names: Tommy, who loved math; Carlos, who drew airplanes; Maria, who could hear again because Jack sold his truck; Daniel, quiet in his wheelchair. None of them treated her with awe or resentment. They just worked beside her. At 7, Betty called dinner: pasta with tomato sauce and garlic bread made from hot dog buns. The children lined up, practiced and polite. Betty handed Clara a plate. "Sit anywhere." Clara sat with Tommy. "This is good," she said. "It's okay," he shrugged. "Miss Betty makes it stretch." The phrase hit her. $10 of food stretched to feed 15 people. At Helios, she'd approved a $30,000 catering budget for a single company event. Enough to feed these children for nearly a year. The thought made her chest tighten. After dinner, they returned to painting. Clara worked until her arms ached and her hair was streaked with white primer. By 8:30, Betty sent the children to bed. They hugged Jack goodnight. Sophie gave Clara a small unreadable look before disappearing down the hall. When the house grew quiet, the three adults sat together in the freshly primed room. "You did well," Jack said. "Most people come here trying to fix everything with money. You just worked." "I didn't know what else to do." "That's honest. Honesty's a good start." Betty brought water in mismatched cups. "Jack says you want to start a foundation." Clara nodded. "If the board approves, I'm fighting for it." "Why?" Clara hesitated, then spoke the truth. "Because I was wrong. I spent my life believing kindness was weakness, that trust gets you hurt. I built walls to survive poverty and never realized they were keeping me from living. Then I met Jack. He survived poverty too, but he stayed soft. He kept giving when it hurt." Her voice trembled. "I want to understand how." Jack looked at her, quiet for a long time. "I wasn't always like this. After my wife died, I was angry. At everything. That anger nearly destroyed me and Ella. Then I found this place. These kids had nothing, yet they still hoped. They still believed they mattered. They saved me, made me realize I had a choice, to let anger win, or build something better. Not for me. For them. That felt like enough." Clara wiped her eyes. "I don't know if I can do that. My walls are very high." Betty's voice was gentle. "Walls can come down, but only if you keep showing up, even when it's hard." Jack nodded. "Come back next Saturday. The kids will watch you. They'll decide, slowly, if you're real. You can't rush that." Clara met his gaze. "I'll be here," and she was. Clara came back the next Saturday, and the Saturday after that, and the one after that. At first the children remained distant, polite but guarded. They had seen too many adults make promises and disappear. Had learned not to trust easily, but Clara kept showing up. She painted walls, helped with homework, though she was terrible at explaining things to children and had to learn patience. She washed dishes after dinner, fixed broken toys with duct tape and ingenuity, learning from Jack. She made mistakes constantly, said the wrong thing, tried to fix problems too quickly, suggested solutions that showed she did not understand their reality. One night she offered to buy all new furniture for the recreation room. Sophie looked at her with something like pity. "We do not need new furniture, Miss Clara. We need the heating fixed. We need the roof not to leak. We need food that is not 3 days from expiring. We need people who stay." Clara learned from that. Learned to ask before assuming, learned to listen before suggesting, learned that what looked like poverty to her was home to them, and changing it required understanding their needs, not imposing her solutions. Slowly, very slowly, the children began to warm to her. Tommy started asking her for help with math homework, teaching her how to explain things at his level. Carlos showed her his drawings explaining what each plane could do. Maria taught her a few words in sign language, patient with her clumsy attempts. Sophie remained wary the longest, but one Saturday evening, 6 weeks after Clara started coming, Sophie sat down beside her during dinner. "You keep coming back," Sophie said. Not a question, an observation. "I do." "Why?" Clara thought about the question. "Because you all matter. Because Mr. Jack should not be the only one showing up. Because I need to learn how to be better." Sophie was quiet for a moment, then pulled a drawing from her pocket. A house with a garden and stick figures holding hands, in careful letters at the bottom. "My family," she pointed to each figure. "That is Mr. Jack, that is Miss Betty, that is Daniel and Tommy, and Carlos and Maria and everyone." She pointed to one more figure. "That is you." Clara felt her throat tighten. "I am in your family." Sophie nodded seriously. "Family is who shows up. You keep showing up, that makes you family." Clara looked at the drawing, at this child's definition of family, not blood, but presence, not obligation, but choice, not words, but actions. She hugged Sophie gently. "Thank you, this is the most beautiful thing anyone has ever given me." Sophie hugged her back, briefly, then ran off to play. Clara kept that drawing in her wallet, looked at it on hard days when she doubted herself, when the walls threatened to go back up. Meanwhile, the work at Helios Group continued. The board meeting about the foundation proposal was brutal. Several board members questioned Clara's priorities, questioned her sudden interest in charity, suggested she was having some kind of crisis. "No crisis," Clara said calmly. "A breakthrough. There is a difference. We have spent years measuring success only in profit. I am proposing we measure it in impact as well. In lives changed, in communities supported, in being a company that actually contributes something beyond shareholder value." The arguments went on for hours. In the end, the vote was close. The foundation was approved with $500,000 in initial funding, less than half what Clara wanted, but enough to start. The matching program for Jack's donations was approved. The employee volunteer hours were approved. It was not everything, but it was something. A beginning. Clara learned that change in large organizations was slow, that some people would resist no matter what, that she would have to fight for every inch of progress. But she learned something else too, that fighting for something that mattered felt different than fighting for profit, that exhaustion from doing good was different than exhaustion from accumulation, that purpose made even the hardest work bearable. 4 months after the all-staff meeting, after weeks of paperwork and approvals and renovations, Clara called Jack into her office. He arrived looking uncomfortable, still not used to being in executive spaces during daylight hours. "You wanted to see me, Clara." She pulled out a folder, slid it across the desk. "Your new employment contract." Jack opened it, eyes widening as he read, "Director of Community Engagement, Helios Heart Foundation." He looked up. "Clara, I cannot. I do not have the qualifications for." "You have the most important qualifications. You understand what real charity looks like. You know how to show up for people who need it. You know the difference between help that matters and help that is just performance." Jack stared at the contract. "The salary is $65,000 annually, plus benefits. Health insurance for you and Ella, a reliable car for visiting charity sites, 3 weeks paid vacation, a housing stipend so you and Ella can get a real 2-bedroom apartment with actual heating." Jack's eyes filled with tears. "I did not do what I did to get rewarded. I know, that is exactly why you are the right person for this job. The foundation needs someone who cannot be corrupted by money or ego, someone who will always remember we are serving people, not building careers." Jack was quiet for a long time. "What about my evenings at Sunshine? Those do not change. Foundation work is daytime hours. You go to Sunshine every evening, just like always. That is non-negotiable, because that is where you are most needed." Jack nodded slowly, then asked quietly, "Why are you really doing this?" Clara thought about the question. Because 30 years ago, I made a choice. I chose to close my heart to protect myself from being hurt. It worked. I survived. I built an empire. But I also built a prison. I have been alone inside it my whole adult life. She met his eyes. You reminded me what living actually means. Not surviving, not accumulating, but connecting, contributing, being part of something larger than yourself. I want to live, Jack, not just survive, and I cannot do that alone. Jack stood and extended his hand. Then let us build something together, something that matters. Clara shook his hand, and something shifted between them. A recognition, a partnership. Two people from similar backgrounds who had learned opposite lessons, coming together to build something neither could create alone. Two people learning slowly, to tear down walls and build bridges instead. 6 months after the photograph that changed everything, Sunshine Orphanage held a celebration. The building was transformed. New roof, new windows, proper heating, fresh paint, real beds, a stocked library, a working kitchen. But the greatest change wasn't in the walls, it was in the people. Helios employees now volunteered every week. Not everyone. Change was slow, but enough. Enough that Betty finally had help, and Jack no longer carried the burden alone. During the celebration, Daniel wheeled himself to Clara, smiling in a way that once seemed impossible. "Miss Clara," he said, handing her a drawing of a bright building filled with faces. At the bottom, careful letters read, "Family is who shows up." Clara felt tears in her eyes. "It's beautiful. It's true," Daniel replied. "You kept coming back. That makes you family." That night, after the children were asleep, Clara and Jack sat together on the front steps, watching the sun set over the street. "I was wrong about you," she said quietly. "I thought kindness came easily to you, but it doesn't, does it?" Jack smiled faintly. "No, it costs something every time, but the alternative costs more. After my wife died, I tried being angry, bitter. It almost destroyed me and Ella. This way is hard, but it's better. How do you keep doing it?" I remember Maria hearing music for the first time, Daniel's first smile, Sophie putting me in her family. That's worth any cost. Clara hesitated. "Do you think I've really changed, or am I just pretending?" "Change isn't about being perfect," Jack said. "It's about showing up, even when you're not. You've done that, over and over. You've changed." Clara laughed softly. "I cry all the time now. I don't know what happened to my walls. They came down," Jack said simply. "It hurts, but it's the only way to live." They sat in silence. Clara thought of the little girl who once believed kindness was dangerous, and the woman who built walls high enough to keep the world out. 6 months later, those walls were gone, replaced by something fragile but alive: trust. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For proving that kindness without audience is real. For teaching me how to live." Jack shook his head. "You chose to change. You did the hard part yourself." When she left, Clara looked back at him sitting on the steps, peaceful, steady, whole. She drove home through the city, but everything looked different now. The homeless no longer invisible, the workers no longer background noise. The city was no longer a circuit board to optimize but a community to care for. At her apartment, she sat in the car for a long time, thinking about Monday morning, the foundation that needed building, the company that still needed changing, the children who needed people to keep showing up. It would be hard, but she had learned something vital. Being safe isn't the same as being alive. Inside, Clara planned next Saturday, thought about the children's faces, felt the pull of something new, not profit, not control, but purpose, connection, love freely given. She thought of Jack Hale, the janitor who had saved her by simply being himself, who proved that kindness without audience was the only kind that mattered. She thought of Sophie's drawing, Daniel's smile, Maria's laughter, all the small cracks where light had entered. Two people from similar pasts, learning opposite lessons, meeting to teach each other what they'd missed. One learning to be soft, one learning to be strong, both learning to be whole. That night, Clara stood before her mirror and for the first time in 30 years recognized herself. Not the frightened girl, or the ruthless CEO, but someone new, someone learning, slowly, how to live. She smiled at her reflection. It felt strange, but real. Later she opened her journal. 6 months ago, I followed a janitor because I couldn't understand how someone with nothing could give so much. I thought I was investigating him. I was really investigating myself. I found a man who survived poverty by choosing softness. I found 12 children who taught me what family means. I found in a crumbling building everything my empire was missing: purpose, connection, joy. I am different now. Vulnerability is terrifying, but it's the only way to truly live. The greatest success isn't building empires. It's building connections, not protecting yourself, but opening yourself. I still stumble. Some days I want to rebuild my walls, but then I remember Sophie's words, family is who shows up, and I think maybe my mother was right. Kindness isn't weakness. The problem was never generosity, but a system that punishes it. This is just the beginning, but for the first time, I'm not afraid, because I'm not alone. I have a family, the kind that shows up. Clara closed the journal, and slept deeply for the first time in months, dreamed of children laughing, of light through broken walls. The next morning, she knew exactly what she was working toward, not profit or empire, but something harder and truer: being good, being present, being part of something larger than herself. And across the city, Jack Hale woke in his small apartment, made breakfast for Ella, and headed to work at the Helios Heart Foundation, ready to keep proving that kindness without audience could change the world, one act, one person, one choice at a time. He had saved 12 children by refusing to stop caring. He had saved a woman in a glass tower by showing her what living truly meant: 2 people, 2 journeys, 1 truth. The heart that stays open despite everything saves not only itself, but everyone it touches. And in the orphanage no longer crumbling, 12 children woke to warmth, safety, and the quiet miracle of people who kept showing up. Family is who shows up, and they did. Every day, that was everything.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.